Welcome back to the Solution Stack podcast. I'm Katarina, your host, and today I have one of our client success managers, Lisa, here with us. We're going to be going into vendor management, and so I'm excited to have her here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Awesome. Lisa, can you tell me about what you do here at FUSE3?
Yes. As you mentioned, I'm on the client success team, and we are the primary point of contact with our clients and help manage and coordinate the activities to keep track of technology, software, AI enablement, cybersecurity. So we work closely with our accounts and make sure that everything's going smoothly. And most importantly, we're proactive in the management of the account. So we're trying to stay in front of any risk that might become problematic or any downtime. So that's our primary role, is to be proactive and stay in front and work closely with our accounts.
Awesome. Can you tell me about your experience before you joined FUSE3?
Definitely. I've been in account management for 20 plus years, primarily in healthcare. And when I had the opportunity to switch industries, I was really excited because, a lot of changes are out there and AI was really getting momentum. So switching over to an IT managed service provider like FUSE3 was easy. And because there are a lot of similarities in healthcare. So when you look at some of the governance and compliance that goes into HIPAA and PHI, and also looking at how AI was really having an impact, I really see a lot of similarities between the two industries. So it was a very easy transition for me to move into this account management role as an IT service provider.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I see the similarities too.
Highly regulated.
Yes, exactly. Can you share about your experience working at a FUSE3 clients company?
Yeah, so I was very familiar with FUSE3 before I even joined the organization. I was one of their clients for 10 plus years, and it was a great partnership. FUSE3 was very instrumental in the scale of this fast growing company. They were on top of it. They were proactive. They were a great partner. And when I was able to have the opportunity to join their client success team, I quickly jumped on it because I knew their values and their partnership with organizations. So it really has been a great experience working with FUSE3.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you here on the podcast, because having that experience of both being a client and a client success manager is really cool. Can you kind of explain what vendor management is and why that matters to business owners?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And vendor management in the managed IT world is really the monitoring, coordinating of our clients' technology, software, AI enablement, cybersecurity. So those are all have to work in sync with each other. It's a very fine-tuned machine, and each client's different. So, I think vendor management is really key. Working with an organization that understands and is proactive and really looks at, hey, if I was in that office and I had a door they could knock on, that's the kind of partner I want to be, as an extension of their organization. So that's why vendor management is really key in finding a great partner.
That makes sense. Can you explain what bad vendor management might look like?
Bad vendor management might look like somebody that just takes tickets and closes them out. An organization that is purely on, hey, let's look at our metrics. Did we close that ticket fast? Did we meet it? You want to make sure that, as the ticket management is coming, that you're looking at, hey, are there any root causes? Is there anything that we can be in front of to minimize future tickets. How do we manage assets and make sure that they're current and up to date and there's no risk? How do we communicate that to our clients ahead of time and really make sure that they can sleep at night and know that they've done everything they can to minimize any risk of a breach, any risk of a downtime. Everybody's well aware of AI guidelines and policies, so no one's putting any information out there. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And so bad vendor management only focuses on one thing. Good vendor management encompasses a lot of different areas.
Okay, Lisa, I'd love to talk about the cost of poor vendor management. What are some ways that poor vendor management can cost a company?
So ways that poor vendor management can cost an organization financial resources is if you let hardware expire, no one's keeping track of warranties or patches. It's just looking on the paper and going, okay, it's there. So you really want to make sure that you deep dive, you're proactive. If there's any risk, that it's communicated. So poor vendor management doesn't do that. It's everything happens after the fact. Oh, I couldn't log in. And that's probably something that could have minimized that. So if you have downtime with an employee sitting around doing nothing, if you have a breach because a patch wasn't uploaded because the system wasn't compatible, those are financial risks that can come with poor vendor management.
That makes a lot of sense. There are certain hidden costs that people don't seem to realize.
Yes. And, it's a lot of it has to do with staying on top of what the changes are in the industry. Our organization's very proactive, or a good organization would be very proactive in making sure that communication goes out to clients timely and that they know that, hey, there's an update coming to your system and it's going to be helpful in minimizing any cybersecurity risks so that you really stay on top of that and communicate that to the clients.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know so much of a lot of professional roles can seem like, making sure nothing slips through the cracks. And it seems like that's kind of what it is making sure nothing slips through the cracks. Is that true?
Yeah. And I think a key part of it is making sure that vendor management silo of cybersecurity is strong. The technology is strong and that you have a great team. So, I work with great partners in cybersecurity and there's a constant state of learning. There's always bad actors trying to get around the system. And we've seen, how creative AI is. For example, one of our monitoring tools is we do phishing simulations. So we can let our clients, users know that, hey, here's what an email might look like that is very similar. AI is putting out some really very closely similar emails that look like they're legitimate coming from an organization. And so we're proactive in saying, hey, here's some ways you can check that email's legitimate. Here's ways that you can be proactive and minimize. And so it's nice that when you're talking to a client in a strategic business review and you're going over that monthly security awareness training, that they see, hey, your users are actively participating in the training and here's some users that might not be participating. So then they can conduct outreach internally to try to get that participation rate up because, if everybody's educated, then you minimize the risk. So our security team works closely on staying in front of that and making sure that they communicate to us, hey, here's, security awareness training results, and please communicate this in your strategic business review.
Yeah, I found that personally helpful, the phishing simulations. It's interesting. I know I report the test ones and I get the, you passed, and recently there was an email I got from, it was from a vendor, and I was wondering if their email was compromised, and I reached out, I texted them, and sure enough it was, and didn't
See,
click
that
it.
was smart. You're instinctively reacted to checking and making that extra phone call instead of doing what most people are, just clicking on it, out of habit or out of, oh, that looks familiar.
Yeah.
So that's really important that you took that pause to say, let me double check this.
Yeah, and I think with AI too, I even realized, like in that email, they signed off how that person from that organization always does, and had a very similar writing style, and AI is, it's copying how people write now, so it's a little bit harder to tell.
This happened just a couple weeks ago. I had a client reach out. We did an email, and they were like, I don't know who this person is. And I was like, oh, okay. So I was very glad that they checked to make sure that that person was with our organization. And I reiterated that back to them, like, hey, the extra minute it took you to reach out to me and just double check the validity of this person within our organization, it warmed my heart. I was like, all right, we're doing a good job. So, that was very rewarding to see that.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine it'd be a lot harder if you didn't have that good relationship with them, though. If you don't have that good vendor management, how comfortable are they reaching out if they're just a little, unsure? So let's see how that ties in here too. What is the biggest mistake that you see clients make with vendor management?
The biggest learning experience I see clients make with vendor management is looking as their IT managed service provider as just a ticket taker. We see that they're just more involved with solve the ticket, and sometimes there's not really communication, proactive communication to say, hey, you know what? We looked into these tickets. We have it well documented. We think, you should upgrade the system. You'll see better performance. You'll have your security patches. And once you can go and see that, wow, once they did that upgrade, then all those issues resolve themselves. And so it's staying in front of that, looking at the ticket history. Personal example, we have AI connected within our organization to all the gold standard tools that we use. And so if there's a pattern we recognize and say, wow, we've had 3 people call in because there's something out there, their Adobe's not working, or it's delayed, or it's slow login. You can do a run and say, hey, there's a pattern here. Let's look into see how we can get to the root cause. So I think just calling in, getting the ticket, moving on, is poor vendor management, and that can cost companies financial resources and time. So, I think that's some businesses might tend just to be like, that's all I want, and so, you want to make sure that you're asking those questions, to your IT provider, and saying, hey, how are you proactive? Simple question, and so if, a bad vendor management is not proactive, they just tell you due dates, get your tickets done, and, call it a day.
You mentioned the clients proactively bringing stuff to the table. What are examples of things that they should be bringing up with their MSP?
That's a great question. And I think, I welcome when somebody says, hey, I noticed this. They should, if there's anything within their gut instinct or something telling them that, I like to do this better, I've noticed this. Can we look into road mapping, asset management. What's going to happen to my budget next year? How can I spend my IT resources wisely to keep things running smoothly, staying in front of what my competitors might be doing? I think that's an excellent question to say, hey, we work closely with specific industries, and a lot of them need technology to drive their performance. And so if they're saying, hey, how can I spend my budget next year? Where can I invest? And having those conversations is a good outreach to your vendor management and with vendor management.
Okay. So not just technology problems, but kind of more business problems or nonprofit problems, I suppose, even too.
Yeah. A lot of it, we work closely with nonprofits, and we're looking at, hey, here's the assets aging. Here's what you're going to need for your budget next year. So when they're doing their financial planning, which is, very tightly regulated, then they know how to work that in, and we're staying proactive with them and helping them reduce cost when we can.
We've spoken a little bit about bad vendor management and what it might look like in the moment. Is there any warning signs kind of before things go bad that you're possibly not having the best relationship with your MSP and you should probably focus on that?
Yeah, I think a good warning sign, if you feel your MSP is not optimizing the value to your organization, would be there's no regular touch point. There's no regular connect. If you can't even say, oh, who do I call outside of a ticket environment, then there's a strain in a relationship. So, we like to say, hey, we have our client success team that regularly meets with clients. We're proactive. We put our faces in front and make sure that they understand that there's an extension in the partnership, and we want to be encouraging that. So somebody that's not doing proactive outreach, letting the dust settle on the shelf, is not a good partner. You want somebody to feel like they're right next door to you in your, an office down the hall.
Okay. If you had to give like a client a wish list of things they could all do, what would those things be? Like, how can a client do their part in meeting their MSP in that relationship?
Yeah, I think with any relationship, good communication is key. Making sure that there's, openness and honesty. If there is a concern with, going to scale, growth, how can we accomplish this? You want to feel that you can have that outreach to your MSP provider and know that you can have honest conversations with them to talk about where the organization's going. Sometimes you see maybe partners might just keep that to themselves and only come when decisions are being made. And then unfortunately, sometimes those decisions might have additional costs down the road because there's not compatibility or something wasn't considered that the MSP provider could have given them feedback in the planning. So you want to make sure that if anything's going on in the organization and a light bulb goes off and you say, maybe we should contact our MSP provider just to, sign off on this or make sure everything's covered. And we do that. We get, hey, we have a new quote for, Wi-Fi, or can you look at this phone bill for us and tell us where, we might be able to save cost, or how can we optimize, some of our licensing. A recent example, and this was proactive. We were looking at all the users for one of our accounts, and somebody said, hey, I don't think this subgroup of users based on their job description requires a premium license. And so we looked at it, confirmed it with the client, and were able to downgrade some of the premium licenses to really what they just needed to function and communicate within the organization. And we're able to save, almost 10% off their monthly spend. So, and that was proactive on our part. And that's rewarding. You want to make sure that you have an MSP that is proactive, but looks at it as being rewarding, because if you're able to save them some financial resources in one area, then they can put it back into what they need to be more functional and optimized, IT wise, down the road.
That makes sense. I was actually on a call with our president, Michael, the other day, and we were going through my cloud account and looking at my token budget. And, he was discussing a different token budget, and he was like, oh, you're actually on this plan. I was like, yeah. And, I could see, though, that, if everyone had a, maxed out account essentially across the organization, that would drastically increase costs. And really, I only run into token budget issues, possibly at the end of the day, but typically not.
Yeah. We're excited. We just rolled out a new tool that looks at software management and utilization. And it's just proactive monitoring. And when do our strategic business reviews, we can look at the application utilization and say, hey, you're paying for 20 licenses for these users, but only 5 of them actively go in there and use the application. That might be something to reconsider. Or is the application not giving them what they need? And I think those are the conversations you need to have to be a great vendor manager, is to say, hey, let's look at this and discuss it. And that can open up some communications internally for them as well.
Awesome. You've mentioned the strategic business review a few times. Can you explain what that includes?
So our strategic business reviews are a regular cadence that we have with accounts, and we discuss really the example I just gave about software management. We discuss asset management. We discuss security, like I mentioned before, the security awareness training results. We like to have open conversations. So a good strategic business review will have that dialogue that's engaging and back and forth. The last thing we want to do is I like to call it data dump, and pull up a PowerPoint that has a bunch of, all the users, all the devices. That information is accessible in our client portal. So, we like to use the information we get to drive better proactive conversations with our client.
That makes sense. Yeah. And you could also see that's probably the time where you're talking about kind of the long-term goals of the organization, trying to, see how we can support that. Is that true?
Yeah.
We've mentioned, having a vendor, and we've also, not on this podcast, we've talked about it before, is the difference between a vendor and a partner. Can you kind of explain how to bridge the gap? If someone has an MSP who's probably kind of a vendor in their minds right now, how do they work with them to truly become a partner?
That's a really good question. And I think it's important that there's time invested in having that regular cadence with them. And if you're in those meetings, asking, do they know my business? Do they know the day-to-day operations? And bridging that. So the partner is an extension of the business, not somebody that's just looking at what's in the system and what's being managed. It's helping our clients be better at what they do, be competitive in what they do, and also manage the cost as well. So that's really key, to stay in front of it and make sure that their spend is wise.
If someone has a current MSP, how do they kind of evaluate the health of that relationship?
If you were looking to say, hey, how is my relationship with my MSP vendor? I would say, how's my relationship with my account manager? How's my team feel about working with that vendor? Do they get quick response time? Do they feel there's resolution? Is it a pleasing experience to engage with the MSP vendor, or is it more frustration? And, I think knowing that the experience is solid, you feel it's a partnership, and there's open communication, then I think that's really healthy in having a successful growth of the program and having a partner be there to make sure that you're going to get your business goals and accomplishments completed.
Okay. I know that sometimes the account managers will work with not just the client, but the client's other vendors. Can you explain that role, that part of your role?
You know what? I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is a really key part of vendor management, is having engagement with the third parties that support our clients. And so we work with them. We know we know each role that those vendors play in the organization. And if we have to do outreach, we can do outreach on behalf of our clients. And if our clients say, hey, we're looking at another tool for note taking or for AI in our office, what are some good options? That's one of the key components of my role as a client success manager, is presenting, hey, here's who you considered, here's who we think might be good based on what we understand about your business, and present that to them. And even if we have to set up some demonstrations and be the liaison to coordinate, a short list for our clients to make decisions on really the needs, and is it a good financial investment if they're going to switch vendors or switch platforms. So we really like to be engaged in those kind of questions. It builds on the partnership.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. If someone's listening to the podcast today and they want to take 3 steps to improving their vendor relationship, how can they do that? What are 3 steps they can take?
The 3 steps I would engage to improve vendor management, or just sort of test the waters and sort of give it a baseline scale, is, do you know your account manager? If you reach out to them, are they responding right away? And how does your team feel about working with them? Those would be, the key components on, hey, do I have a successful relationship with my MSP vendor? And how does my team feel about working with them?
If you had to go back and tell an old version of yourself, like the version of you who maybe worked at the FUSE3 clients company, what would you say?
That's an excellent question. And, I wish we all could go back in time at some point. But if I had to tell my past self that was a client of FUSE3, I would really make sure that they understood everything FUSE3 invests in to make sure that the organization is running smoothly. FUSE3 has great platforms. They use gold standard tools in regards to cybersecurity monitoring the assets, monitoring the software, and they stay in front of it, and they're quick to help with scale and growth. And every client, regardless of size, gets the same prioritization. And that's one of the big main takeaways I would tell my past self. And then also let her know, and then one day you'll be working for them. So give her something to look forward to.
I love that. Is there any other important points that you want to bring up on vendor management today?
I think we covered a lot. The one thing I do want to talk about is where it's going. We briefly talked about AI and AI's role in vendor management. And really, in the last 6 months, we've really engaged with our clients to talk about AI enablement. Where do you start? What does it look like? And, everybody has a different part of the journey they're on. And, and it's trying to say, okay, how can we get them to step one? Some clients might say, oh no, we have an AI governance policy. We're on it. Hey, can you look at the AI tools our team wants to use? How do we help them manage the data that needs to stay contained and communicate that it's important that you get an AI policy and governance to make sure your users stay within those guidelines. Then that minimizes the risk. How do we help them, manage AI licensing? You mentioned tokens, with our new software analysis, or software tool, we can look at that and say, hey, you have these users that are using a lot of tokens. Maybe we move them to a different category or a different AI option for them based on their utilization, or if you have a bunch of users that are using the tokens, how do you go and say, hey, your staff's about to knock on your door and mutiny because they want more AI tokens. So, how do you stay in front of that? And so we're seeing those conversations with AI. It's exciting. It's nice to be there to help support and let our clients know, like, oh, my vendor, my MSP vendor is AI driven, they're knowledgeable, and I trust them and I feel confident in the discussions you may have regarding AI.
Can you share a little bit about how your team is using AI?
Yes. So our team, I guess it sort of mirrors what I'm seeing with clients, actually. You start off slow. You get your AI governance policy in place. Everybody understands, hey, if you want to use AI, here it is. And then sort of test the waters. And so our team, said, hey, here's how we're using AI. And then that built the trust within the organization to say, okay, let's look at giving you more integrations. And we're going to integrate our CRM. We're going to integrate our asset management tool. So if you ask AI a question, it can run out there and get the data for you and really save hours of time preparing meetings, being proactive, looking at the data that's there to be a crystal ball in the future of the client's health. And so AI has sort of just taken the mundane, I guess. I don't want to, everybody, it's part of the job, but it's the part that sometimes people don't like to do because it's repetitive and it's doing the same thing. So with an AI, we're able to say, hey, can you build this report for me and make sure that I'm staying on track? And it really has been a game changer for me in the organization and within our team, our client success team. We're utilizing it and we enjoy it, and we're encouraging our other team members to use it as well. Our organization did an AI contest to say, hey, with these tools and integrations we gave you, how would you build? What would you do to be more productive in your day to day? And that was great that FUSE3 initiated that and encouraged it. So it took the small subset of users that might not be familiar and gave them an opportunity to dig in a little deeper. And that really helped the organization build up everybody's AI knowledge base, a lot of communication among peers on how they're using it. And so, it's nice to see that internally and then see it externally when clients are going down the same path and they're gradually expanding AI to the users, and building that confidence and trust in the tool.
Yeah. I think in our last All Hands, they really shared that multiple of the winners from the AI contest, they're actually going to implement those tools internally. So that was really cool to hear.
They are. And so,
go ahead, sorry.
No. I was just going to say, some of our AI conversations are, hey, we know your tools that you have. If there's any opportunity to connect some dots there for our clients and say, hey, how can we reduce some of the manual work? We've seen a lot having to do with manual inputting of data because this one system doesn't talk to this other system. So we have to print up the report, and then I have to have somebody spend an hour every day putting in this data, when you can have AI build that bridge and really take all of that manual process out and give that individual an extra hour in the day to focus on something that's more proactive for the organization. They can use that extra hour to really focus on other projects that are going to, move the organization closer to what they want to see.
Yeah, I know from the marketing side, we've had some issues with that of, things that don't connect, or you could connect them, but they'd be like an extra $2,000 a month. And, we've been able to come up with things, using AI to build integrations that can connect them for maybe, $50 a month, $100 a month instead of.
And that's that vendor engagement that we talked about. There's so many tools out there that can do a connectivity or optimize, performance, and there's so much information. So we're able to shortlist for our clients and engage our AI experts here and meet with the client, and one thing I'm always impressed is how our professional service team leadership or our AI cybersecurity leadership jump on the meetings with us and support our client success team and, say, hey, I'm happy to talk to clients and walk through, what they're thinking and how do we roadmap that for them, to help them. And a lot of it now is moving everybody, not everybody, but that switch. When do you make the switch to go to the cloud? Do you need to go to the cloud? So, we're having those discussions as well.
You mentioned kind of finding these places to automate. Is that part of your role? Do you help, kind of help clients figure out where those opportunities are, or is that someone else on the team?
Great question. I am not the AI expert. I'm not the technology expert. I'm the coordinate and gather information, present it internally and externally, and get the parties to meet and make sure that there's best use of time. I'll do our CSM team will do the heavy lifting and do all the research and connect, put everything in front. But we like to bring in the technology experts to connect the dots, point in different directions if necessary. And I think a lot of that doesn't need the client, shouldn't have to do a lot of that. We should present them with recommendations that are solid and based on our experience, and make sure that, oh, wow, I feel like I got all the information I need to make a decision on how I'm going to invest into some of this technology. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing all of this. Any last thoughts to add?
Well, one, thank you very much for the podcast series. It's been great to see all the different aspects that go into a managed service provider for IT. Excited to see where this may go. We represent different verticals, and so I can see maybe connecting with you down the road on some other topics. So this has been great, Katerina. I'm so happy and excited, to see, 6 months down the road, show some clippets of this video and go, wow, things have changed in a short period of time.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for coming here, and thank you everyone for tuning into the Solution Stack podcast. It's great to have you here. And if you haven't given us a follow yet, make sure to push that follow button. And if you're wanting to connect with our team, you can find us at FUSE3.com.